The day I was wheeled into the operating room, my family and my girlfriend were all somewhere else, watching my adopted brother at his competition. That was the day my surgery had a complication. They successfully removed the tumor from my brain, but the procedure ended up damaging a nerve. As a result, I lost the ability to feel normal human emotions. I had a tumor growing in my brain. My original plan was to tell my parents and my girlfriend about it, but when I tried, my parents were busy buying plane tickets. They were planning to go overseas with my adopted brother, Leo, for his painting competition. My girlfriend, Sarah, had been working late every night for weeks. My fingers stayed over the keyboard, looking at the chat window for a long time. In the end, I just deleted the message I had typed out. I had a feeling that even if I did tell them, nobody would really care. It felt like, in everyone's eyes, my life just wasn't as important as my adopted brother's. My adopted brother, Leo, was the son of my dad's old friend from the army. When Leo was 6 years old, a car accident killed both of his parents. After that, his relatives pushed him around and didn't want him. He ended up living on the streets, dirty and by himself, until my dad found him. My dad had been in town to pay his respects to his friend and found Leo instead. From that day on, Leo became the second son in our family. I was 10 years old that year, and Leo was 6. My parents sat me down and told me, "Mark, you're a big boy now. You need to learn how to take care of your little brother." I didn't really understand what it meant to take care of a little brother. All I knew was that Leo always looked weak and very fragile. He never had to do anything specific. He could just stand there and look at me with his eyes full of tears, and suddenly, everything that was supposed to be mine would become his. When I was 10, I lost my bedroom and had to move into the small guest room down the hall. When I turned 12, my piano lessons were stopped. The piano was sold, and the room where it used to be was turned into an art studio for Leo. After I turned 15, I never got new clothes again. I just wore my 2 school uniforms, rotating between them. My parents didn't seem to notice or care. They dressed Leo in expensive, stylish clothes and would brag to anyone who would listen about how handsome their son was and how much potential he had. From that point on, I just stopped going home as much as I could. The year I was getting ready to graduate from college, Leo went to a university in another state. For a short time, my parents seemed to remember that I existed. They started to call me often, asking about my life and my classes. Occasionally, they would even send me links to job postings in my city. Helping his friend's orphaned son get into college was one of my dad's proudest achievements. He felt like he was on top of the world. He told me he wanted to come to my city, to visit me. He also said he wanted to properly meet my girlfriend of 3 years, Sarah, to see if she was a good match for me. I had learned a long time ago not to expect anything from them. Still, I went ahead and booked a hotel room for them and made a reservation at a nice restaurant for their visit. I just didn't expect that Leo, who I hadn't seen in a very long time, would be with them when they arrived. That day, his smile was so innocent, just like it was when he first came to live at our house. He smiled at my girlfriend, Sarah, in that same way all through dinner. Later, I was looking at my phone and saw Leo's profile picture pinned to the very top of her text messages. Before I was taken into the operating room, I couldn't stop myself from calling my parents one last time. The call only lasted for 3 seconds. I heard my parents' rushed voices on the other end of the line. "Mark, we're about to board the plane. Your brother's competition is very important. Whatever it is you need to tell us, we'll talk about it when we get back." They hung up the phone before I could even say a single word. I just stared at my phone's dark screen, completely stunned. Just then, a new post from my girlfriend, Sarah, popped up on my social media feed. She was posting about going off to chase her own adventure. The picture she posted was of a plane ticket, and the destination printed on it was the exact same country where Leo's competition was being held. I stared blankly at the screen for a long time, until my aunt, who was sitting in the chair next to my hospital bed, couldn't watch me anymore. She gently took the phone from my hand. "I've already signed the consent form for you, Mark, so don't you worry about a thing. I'll take responsibility for anything that happens." She lovingly stroked my head and let out a deep sigh. "Your father has been a fool for so many years, and you're the one who has had to suffer for it. Go on, honey. I'll be right here waiting for you when you get back." I was wheeled into the operating room, and the anesthesia slowly started to take effect. Before I lost consciousness, I couldn't help but wonder, if I died during this surgery, would my parents even shed a tear for me? And Sarah. I thought that when I got out of here, I had to tell her to her face that we were through. I knew she had already moved on a long time ago. This time, I was the one who was finished with her. My story with Sarah wasn't some kind of epic romance, but back in college, it was a relationship that all our teachers and classmates seemed to admire. It started in a very cliché way. The popular student body president, who was seen as handsome and from a good family, helped a girl on the event staff who had fainted from low blood sugar after working all day without eating. The second time we met, she had 2 pieces of candy saved in her pocket, just for him. From then on, keeping candy in her pocket for me became Sarah's habit. In her eyes, I was so fragile that a strong gust of wind could probably knock me over. She would always look at me with a lot of concern and say, "Mark, I've never been so afraid of losing someone." She said I meant more to her than anyone else in the world. She said there would always be a special place for me by her side, just like her coat pocket would always have candy ready for me. But the last time, after I had pulled an all-nighter for 2 meetings in a row, I reached into Sarah's coat pocket hoping to find some. All I found was a small bottle of perfume. It was Chanel, which I knew was Leo's favorite brand. I quietly put the perfume back in her pocket without saying anything. From then on, I learned to carry my own candy. My life split into 2 different paths when I was 10 years old. From that age on, I tried to get used to living without relying on anyone else. I lowered my expectations for everyone around me. My thinking was, if you don't expect anything, you can't be disappointed. And you won't fall into despair when the disappointments keep piling up. But I'm only human, and I was far from being as detached as I wanted to be. Sarah spent a full year pursuing me, and then she spent the next 3 years caring for me deeply. For 4 whole years, she slowly broke down the walls I had built around myself, bit by bit. She made me feel like I finally had someone I could rely on. But stories are almost always clichés. Just when I thought I had found someone I could truly trust, she had a change of heart. She fell for my adopted brother, Leo. At first, it was just pity for his tragic childhood. Then, it was his lively and energetic personality that drew her in, capturing her attention at every turn. Later, she listened as Leo told her, word by word, about his deep passion for painting, and she was there to witness his triumphs on stage. Finally, she realized what her true feelings were. Sarah said she had never met anyone so special, so genuine, like a blazing fire. Because of him, she discovered for the first time that love was supposed to be a burning, passionate flame. What she felt for me, she said, was more like familial affection and a comfortable daily routine. This is what Sarah confessed to me one night when she was drunk. After that, she began meticulously planning how to pursue Leo, and at the same time how to break up with me. Of course, I was planning the same thing. I was going to bow out of their world, but I wanted to do it with as much dignity as I could. It was something I had done often in my first 20 years of life, getting used to being ignored and quietly disappearing from view. But all of those thoughts changed the moment I opened my eyes after the surgery. I realized something. The one who should disappear wasn't me. The first person to notice the change in me was my aunt. She sat by my bedside, peeling an apple for me and telling me funny stories from her day to try and cheer me up. Then she seemed to realize that I didn't need cheering up. In her eyes, I had always been the quiet and reserved one, the kid who rarely voiced his own needs or wants. But she could always see it in my eyes, that deep down I still longed for my parents' affection, for the complete family love that should have been mine all along. But now, that longing was gone. After the surgery, I was unnervingly cold. So, on the 5th day after my operation, she tentatively asked if I wanted to call my parents. I refused. In the past, even though my parents didn't really care about what I was doing, I would always make a point to report back to them after any major event in my life. But this time, I had no intention of contacting them at all. My aunt looked at me with growing concern on her face. After a long moment of silence, she just sighed. She muttered to herself, "The way your father and mother are acting, they'll live to regret this one day." Another 2 weeks passed, and with my Aunt Clara's help, I was discharged from the hospital. During that time, the doctors came to check on my condition regularly. When they asked if I felt anything unusual or different, I told them calmly, "I've never felt better." The chaotic emotions that used to cloud my mind and prevent me from thinking clearly were all gone. Now, I could see many things with perfect calm and rationality. For instance, I understood that my parents truly didn't care about me. This meant I probably wouldn't get a share of their inheritance, but the responsibility of caring for them in their old age would most likely fall on me, and the company that Sarah and I had started together. Since I was always the one handling all the difficult parts, the company would do just fine with only me running it. I would no longer beg them for affection or approval. But when it came to the assets and the life that were rightfully mine, I wouldn't give up a single cent. The day my Aunt Clara took me home, we ran into my parents and my adopted brother. The happy family was just returning from their trip. My adopted brother, Leo, had won a major prize in his competition, and to celebrate, they had extended their trip abroad for another 2 weeks. Their social media feeds were flooded with vacation photos, but not a single person had bothered to send me a message or ask what my urgent phone call was about that day. The cheerful family walked in the front door and saw me standing in the living room, pale as a ghost. An awkward expression appeared on all 4 of their faces at the exact same time. That's right, 4 of them. Sarah was there too. "Mark, I won the grand prize. I invited Sarah over to celebrate. You don't mind, do you?" Leo was the first one to react. He quickly walked over and intimately linked his arm with mine, as if we were the closest of brothers. Sarah snapped out of it too. She looked like she wanted to say something, but when her eyes met mine, she couldn't bring herself to tell any more lies in front of me. My parents also looked uncomfortable. They didn't say anything. They just looked at me expectantly. It was as if they hoped I would be sensible, like I always was, and just let the whole thing slide. The old me would have. After all, I had always been their most low-maintenance child. But now, under their watchful eyes, I slowly and deliberately removed Leo's hand from my arm. "Mark?" Leo's eyes instantly turned red, and he looked like he was about to burst into tears. "Mark, you're a grown man. Is it really necessary to pick on your little brother? Why are you being so immature?" My dad immediately found his angle of attack and started yelling at me. Sarah couldn't help but jump in to defend Leo. My mom stayed quiet, just letting them berate me without saying a word. That is, until my aunt, who had been upstairs packing my things, came down the stairs. She took my hand and started leading me toward the front door. Only then did my dad and Sarah stop talking. "Stop! Where do you think you're going?" This time, it was my mom who spoke. She was the woman who loved to brag to outsiders about how easy I was to raise, only to turn around and give all the best things to Leo. "To my place, for some peace and quiet. If this child stays here with you, who knows when you'll bully him to death?" my aunt shot back, turning to glare at them with red-rimmed eyes. My mom was taken aback. She didn't argue with my aunt, but turned her focus back to me. "Mark, you're our son. Are you really going to leave with your aunt? Think about how bad that would look," she said, her brow furrowed slightly. Her tone was full of disapproval and a hint of resentment, as if my decision was causing her a huge inconvenience. She had always been like this, an expert at using a soft touch to make me feel guilty. But now, I no longer felt that familiar pull on my heartstrings, so I told her the simple truth. Yes, Aunt Clara was the one who signed my surgical consent form. From now on, she's the only family I recognize. "What kind of nonsense is that?" My dad's temper flared instantly. He strode forward to hit me, but Sarah stepped in and stopped him. My aunt seized the opportunity and quickly pulled me away. My mom's voice trailed after us, relentlessly questioning. "Surgery? What surgery? Why didn't you tell me?" She kept pounding on the car window, even after my aunt and I were safely inside. Seeing this, my aunt rolled down the window just enough and kindly enlightened her. "Have you ever heard of brain tumor surgery? A while back, your son had a tumor in his head. He almost missed his window for treatment because he couldn't find a family member to sign the consent form. In the end, he came to me for help, and we caught it just before the tumor turned malignant." As she spoke, my mom's face went completely white. "Something this serious? Why didn't he tell us?" she muttered to herself, looking confused. My aunt smiled and reminded her, "2 weeks ago, Mark called you guys many times." My mom seemed to remember something. She pulled out her phone in disbelief and frantically started searching through her call history. "It won't do you any good to find the call log, you know," my aunt said. "You answered the phone, but who among you had the patience to listen to what Mark had to say? You were all too busy getting your precious adopted son on a plane." With that, my aunt ignored her, stepped on the gas, and we sped away. That night, my mom tried to contact me, but she found that I had blocked all of her accounts. My dad, Leo, and Sarah were blocked too. Unable to reach me and still feeling the humiliation from earlier, my parents couldn't bring themselves to contact my aunt and uncle. Instead, they went around to all our relatives, complaining about how petty and ungrateful I was. They said I was just jealous of my brother's award-winning talent, that I didn't bother to tell my family I was sick, and that I had embarrassed them by running to my aunt's house. When my aunt first saw what they were saying in the family group chat, she was so angry she had to laugh. She told me to just ignore the messages. Then she turned around and posted my medical records, along with the photos she had taken of me in the hospital, right into the chat. She specifically tagged my parents. My aunt asked them how their consciences could be so corrupt. Their own son was seriously ill in the hospital, his life hanging by a thread multiple times because they delayed his surgery. Yet to this day, they hadn't offered a single word of concern. Instead, they downplayed a malignant brain tumor as just a little thing, and immediately started slandering their son, who was still in recovery. Their lies exposed, my parents flew into a rage in the family chat. They sent a volley of long, angry voice messages back at my aunt. My aunt, however, didn't engage with them. She simply left the group. She told me, "Honey, what your father and mother did was wrong. I know you've done nothing wrong. If you feel sad, just cry it out. Don't bottle it up and hurt yourself." In response, I just looked at her calmly. I told her that I wasn't sad at all. In fact, I hadn't felt a single ripple of emotion through the whole ordeal. Seeing my parents again, I no longer cared whether they were concerned about me or not. All I could think about was how to sever ties with them completely. It was better than being tangled up in this mess, only to be dragged down by them later and have my life turn into a total disaster. Under the moonlight, I saw the astonishment in my aunt's eyes. Those kind eyes were wide open, and within moments they filled with pain. I knew something was wrong with me. I could clearly recognize other people's emotions, but I couldn't feel any of my own. It was probably a side effect of the surgery, but I didn't hate it. In fact, I thought it was better this way. I still had my ability to tell right from wrong. I just saw things more objectively and rationally now. For example, I knew with certainty that my Aunt Clara genuinely cared for me. Even if I couldn't feel the emotion called gratitude, I knew I should honor and care for her for the rest of my life. As for my parents, they may have noticed the change in me, but they were still dreaming that I would come crawling back to them, ready to be manipulated again. But they didn't know that was never going to happen again. Another 2 weeks passed. My parents constantly bragged on their social media about how well they treated Leo, and they had other people relay the messages to me. They wanted me to feel regret. They wanted me to know that if I were smart enough, if I knew how to back down and suck up to them like Leo did, then they could treat me that well too. Never mind that for the past 20-odd years, that's exactly what I had been doing. Finally, when I showed no reaction at all, they started to panic. One day, standing outside my office building, I saw my parents and Leo, the perfect family of 3. Standing right there with them was Sarah, who had also been missing for 2 weeks. When Sarah saw me, she instinctively opened her mouth to say hello, but in the end, nothing came out. She just looked away, guilt plain on her face. Seeing this, Leo's expression soured. Unlike the glamorous young man in my parents' social media posts, Leo looked haggard. His eyes were red and swollen, as if he had just been crying, but the moment he saw me, his eyes lit up. They were clearly up to no good, but I had no interest in watching their performance. I was about to ignore them and walk inside when my dad grabbed my wrist. He said, "Mark, Leo is suffering from severe depression because he feels so guilty about what happened with you. The doctor says he needs his partner by his side. We've already spoken to Sarah, and we know you'll do the right thing for your brother, won't you?" When I didn't answer, he added, "Leo is becoming quite a name in the art world now. We've invested so much money to build his career over the years. As his older brother, you can't just stand by and watch it all go down the drain." His sharp, demanding voice was giving me a headache. I silently pulled my hand away from his grasp and looked at the 4 of them, each with their own ulterior motives. Now that the filter of so-called family affection was gone, I could see their hidden intentions as clear as day, even if Sarah wanted to be with Leo. There were plenty of decent ways to handle it. Not like this, making a huge scene at my office to force my hand. Ultimately, they were just testing my limits, trying to see if I was still the same obedient son who would endlessly sacrifice his own interests to please them. "Fine," I said, after a moment of thought. But before any of them could show a hint of relief, I turned to Sarah. 3 years of college, plus 3 years building this company. That's 6 years of my life. I want 50% of the company's original shares as compensation. As if she never expected me to ask for anything, Sarah's face darkened. She was about to say something, but I upped the ante. "Once the compensation is paid, I won't say another word about you and Leo. You don't even have to invite me to your wedding. I won't be living at the family home anymore. As long as you don't bother me, I'll disappear from your lives completely. You wouldn't want your precious artist to be labeled a homewrecker, would you?" The moment the words left my mouth, Leo reacted instantly. He didn't give Sarah time to think. He just hugged her arm and whimpered pitifully. Sarah had always prided herself on being above material things, seeing money as trivial. Now, blinded by love, she actually agreed. Sarah and I had founded the company together. I held 26%, and she held 35%. Over the years, I had bought back another 10% of the shares from other investors. If Sarah transferred her 15% to me, I would become the largest shareholder in the company, and Sarah would inevitably be sidelined. To prevent her from changing her mind once she came to her senses, I immediately took out my phone and had my secretary prepare the transfer documents. I also called a notary to come to the office. The moment the shares were legally in my name, I wished Leo and Sarah a long and happy life together with the utmost sincerity. I even walked them to the company entrance. Leo looked at me with the triumphant expression of a winner. "Mark, you've got your money. You can't bother Sarah anymore, okay?" I smiled and called over a nearby security guard, ready to have them escorted out. My mother came around from behind him, her eyes fixed on me. "What do you mean you're never coming home again?" she asked. When I didn't respond, she clutched her chest and started accusing me. "You ungrateful child! Are you trying to kill me?" She started putting on her usual act, pretending my words had made her physically ill. But I would no longer feel guilty or give in to her feigned illnesses, as I had in the past. I didn't even glance at her. I just turned to leave. Finally, the look of smug certainty in my mother's eyes vanished. "Honey? What's wrong?" she asked, grabbing the corner of my shirt. Her face was filled with panic, and her voice trembled. She realized it. Her fake illnesses, her strategic retreats, all the old tricks she used to control me, no longer worked. Because I didn't care about her anymore. I would no longer compromise for her. "Mrs. Hayes," I said softly, looking at her and the family standing behind her. "From now on, you all need to live your lives well." "You bastard! What is that supposed to mean?" My father, who had been silent until now, letting my mom do all the performing, suddenly got agitated. He rushed forward, hand raised, to strike me. Sarah tried to stop him, but Leo held her back firmly. In the chaos, a team of bodyguards I had called in advance stepped in front of me. Now it was my dad's turn to be stunned. He clutched his chest, looking like he was about to faint from anger. It was the exact same act my mom had pulled just moments earlier. By this point, Sarah had finally broken free from Leo's grasp and walked over to me. She looked at me with disapproval. "Mark, you can hate me, but your parents are still your parents. You're going too far." "Uh-huh, right," I said, having no time to waste on them. I simply looked down at my phone and started dealing with work emails. Sarah was speechless at my indifferent attitude. She was about to say more, but I looked up at her, my expression completely serious. "Sarah, there's nothing left for us to talk about. Your money is enough. I really don't want to have any more contact with you as a person." When she saw the cold, calm look on my face, a flicker of panic finally appeared in her expression. "By the way, given your unannounced 2-week absence, we can no longer trust you. The company has officially decided to remove you from your position as CEO. I hope you can maintain some professional courtesy and not make a scene. It would be best if you just disappeared." With that, I held up my phone, and right in front of her, blocked her on the company's internal messaging channel too. Ignoring Sarah's ugly expression, I turned and walked away. As expected, I took over Sarah's former position. I then worked with the other shareholders to apply pressure until finally, Sarah was forced to sell off her remaining shares. It seems that relationships really can get in the way of business. After getting rid of Sarah, the company began to thrive. As for Sarah, while I was raking in profits, she was still lost in her role as a lovesick heroine, fully dedicated to her romance with her ex-fiancé's brother. Even then, they still thought they were the winners. Leo became incredibly ostentatious, constantly taking Sarah and my parents to check in at various expensive places on social media, showing off their perfect family and love life. Of course, Sarah footed the bill for everything. My parents' finances had been tight since they retired. Over the years, all their savings had been poured into paving the way for Leo's art career. They had relied on me to maintain their facade of prosperity, and now the whole family had seamlessly latched onto Sarah as their new cash cow. The relatives who used to interact with them didn't know the real story and showered them with praise for finding such a great catch. Just as they were all eagerly spreading the word about how happy their little family of 4 was, I bought my Aunt Clara a new house. I moved her out of her old, run-down apartment complex and into a detached house in a nice neighborhood downtown. My aunt never married and had no children. She had always treated me like her own son. At first, she refused to let me put her name on the deed until I told her that if the house was in her name, it would be safe from any blood-sucking schemers. I tried to recall how I used to act cute with her when I was a child, mimicking an affectionate expression as I leaned on her shoulder. "From now on, I'll live with you, Auntie. You won't get tired of me, will you?" I said. My aunt's eyes immediately reddened. She patted my back and whispered softly, "Never, never. As long as I'm here, Mark will always have a home." When my parents heard I'd bought my aunt a house, they were furious. They showed up outside our gated community that very night. But the security was tight. Since they weren't on the list, they weren't even allowed to wait at the gate for more than 3 minutes. My dad called my aunt's phone and unleashed a torrent of abuse. In his mouth, my aunt became a malicious schemer who was driving a wedge between a father and his son. My aunt listened calmly and then asked, "Brother, with all the things you've done to Mark, do you really need me to drive a wedge?" My dad's voice faltered. Before he could argue, my aunt continued, "You say Mark is your son, so why is there no bedroom for him in your house? There's no set of dishes for him. He's not even in the family photos you have on the wall. You claim he's your son, but where exactly does he fit in?" I remembered one bitter winter when I had no winter clothes. I had to layer all my fall and spring school uniforms and was shivering in the snowstorm. But when I got home, the house was empty. My parents had taken Leo to the movies. There were no leftovers for me in the kitchen, and I had no money in my pocket. Before I passed out, I used my last bit of strength to walk to the entrance of my aunt's apartment complex. My aunt lived 5 long blocks away from my house. It felt like the longest journey of my life. If I had collapsed anywhere in that storm, I would have never reached my safe harbor. Luckily, I made it. At the gate, I saw my aunt coming down to throw out the trash, holding an umbrella. I saw the shock and worry on her face as she rushed over and hugged my freezing, numb body. From that day on, I had a home again. My room was at my aunt's house. My dishes were at her table. She even bought back the very same piano that had been sold, placing it quietly in her living room. I had long forgotten how to play, but that day I made a silent vow. As long as I was here, I would be my aunt's greatest support in her later years. So now, when my dad on the phone was stumped by my aunt's questions and started spewing curses again, I calmly took the phone from her and spoke. "Forget about the new house. Say one more word, and you won't even have a roof over your heads now." I'd almost forgotten. It wasn't just the house. Their living expenses had also been coming from my bank account. Their meager pensions and savings had been completely depleted years ago, spent on flying Leo around the world for competitions and hiring famous art tutors for him. And yet, they still treated me like dirt, looking down on me in every way. The voice on the other end of the line was silent for 2 seconds, followed by my dad's thunderous roar. "Mark, have you lost your mind? You fucking dare!" The louder he yelled, the more insecure he was. "I've already died once on an operating table. There's nothing I don't dare to do now, Mr. Hayes," I stated calmly. My dad took this as me complaining about their behavior. He switched to a softer approach, trying his usual tactic of stick and carrot. He said, "In the end, you're just upset that we care so much about your brother. Why don't you think about how pitiful your brother is? It seems you really think your current place is too spacious." I hung up and immediately contacted a real estate agent. While I was preparing to sell the house, my dad and his family didn't give up. To force me to show myself, they started stalking me and causing scenes wherever I went. I ignored them for 3 days, had someone record everything they did to gather enough evidence, and then I called the police. Soon, they were detained for 15 days for disturbing the peace. My parents had always thought of themselves as respectable people. They never imagined they'd be sent to a police station by their own son in their old age. They cursed me out in front of the police, loudly recounting my supposed lack of filial piety. It was very noisy. I put in my earplugs and told the mediating officer that I would absolutely not agree to a reconciliation. As he was being led away, the father who had always been a figure of authority in my memory looked at me with a hint of fear. Realizing that I might actually cut them off for good, his tone softened. He called my name. Mark, Mark, over and over, a term of endearment I hadn't dared to hope for since I was 10. But I was devoid of emotion now. I wouldn't feel sorry for him. Unfortunately, Leo managed to get away. The moment my parents were taken away, he and Sarah skipped town for a vacation. To protect the reputation of the rising art star they had so carefully cultivated, my parents insisted that they had orchestrated everything themselves, and that Leo had absolutely nothing to do with it. I pictured Leo's smug, troublemaking face and figured I'd get my chance with him sooner or later. So I used this time to sell the old house at a low price to a tough-looking guy with full-sleeve tattoos who looked like he had connections. And so, before my parents were even released, Leo returned from his trip to stand in front of his former home, unable to get in. Apparently, Leo didn't believe the house was gone, and banged on the door for a long time, demanding an explanation. When the door opened and he saw the new owner, a man standing 6'3", he was too scared to say another word. In the end, Sarah had to come pick him up and take him to her place. A couple of days later, my parents were released. When they heard I had sold the house, they cursed up a storm again. But no one dared to come and bother me. Survival was now their main concern. So, very quickly, my parents packed their bags and moved into Sarah's house in the middle of the night. At first, Sarah was very welcoming, but my parents had gotten used to bossing me around for years. Having lost their favorite punching bag, it wasn't long before they started showing their nasty tempers to Sarah. Sarah wasn't someone who had ever been pushed around. Soon, they had their first major fight. Not long after, my parents moved out of Sarah's house. She rented a separate apartment for them halfway across the city. My parents complained endlessly to Leo about it. They said that when Sarah was with me, she was never this disrespectful to them. Why couldn't Leo say something to her? But Leo himself was relying on Sarah's money for his art career. How could he possibly stand up to her? Over time, to maintain his relationship with Sarah, Leo started to distance himself from my parents. One day, Leo was visiting my parents and heard them complaining about Sarah again. They also reminisced about how easy life was when I was taking care of them. It was their classic move: build one person up to tear another down. In the end, it was all for their own benefit, but Leo wasn't falling for it. He had had enough. He immediately smashed everything he could get his hands on in the apartment, then stood with his hands on his hips and asked my parents, since they thought I was so great, why didn't they go find me? It was the first time he had ever lost his temper in front of them. Now that he had Sarah wrapped around his finger, his family was just an accessory to him. He no longer needed to walk on eggshells around anyone. The fight they had that day was epic. The main combatant was my mother. She was wailing at the door of the rental, pulling Leo's hair one moment, calling him an ungrateful brat who had betrayed all her years of guidance and investment. The next moment, she was cursing me for being cruel, saying that things had been this way for years. So what if they missed one surgery? Why did I have to make such a big deal out of it? My dad, feeling embarrassed, just smoked silently inside the house. Julian fought back, trading insults with my mom, calling her a blood-sucking, insatiable vampire. The whole thing ended only when the entire floor of neighbors came out to watch the spectacle. The incident became notorious. All the relatives who used to flatter them scattered and cut off contact. One relative told me about my parents' situation, sighing as she spoke. Back then, your parents loved to hear people praise them for being such good guardians. They'd say how they raised Leo, an army buddy's son, like a prince, all because they were so kind-hearted. Who would have thought they were raising an ungrateful traitor? As she spoke, she kept glancing at me, a fawning smile on her face. Mark, I have to say, your aunt has a good eye. She picked a real gem in you. Now all she has to do is enjoy her golden years. My aunt, however, was not impressed. She unceremoniously kicked the woman out. The moment the door closed, she was still fuming. When you were little, she was always making fun of you, calling you a wild child. Now that her son is graduating and needs a job, she's suddenly singing your praises. These people, always kissing up and kicking down. Ugh, give me a break. I didn't feel much about it. I had met too many people like that in the first half of my life. But under the warm, yellow light, watching my aunt worry about me, a sudden, subtle warmth bloomed in my chest, fleeting as it was. It was only then that I vaguely realized that my aunt's dark hair was now streaked with silver. I walked over and took her hand, telling her not to be angry, that I would take her out for a big meal. Auntie, I said. She was wrong. It's not that you had a good eye and picked me, it's that I was lucky enough to meet you. To have met someone in this mundane world who would shelter me from the wind and rain without any complaint. Under the light, my aunt's eyes gradually reddened. She couldn't help but turn away to wipe her eyes. After a while, she turned back to me with a smile. What silly things are you saying? She said. I'm your aunt, your blood relative. It's only natural that I love you. I worked harder than ever. Because I saw things with such rationality and objectivity, the company's profits multiplied. My net worth soared along with it. The next time I saw Sarah was at a business gala hosted by one of our partners. Sarah was wearing a meticulously tailored suit, her hair perfectly styled. But even that couldn't hide the weariness on her once vibrant face. On closer inspection, her suit was from last season. It seemed that supporting a family of vampires wasn't easy on her either. Promoting Leo's art cost a fortune, and my parents' living expenses weren't cheap. It would have been one thing if Sarah were willing to ask her family for help, but her parents had extremely high standards. They hadn't approved of me when I was starting from scratch with Sarah. Now they looked down on Leo, who only knew how to leech off others, even more. If Sarah wanted her family's support, she would have to break up with Leo first. It was clear she was deeply in love. That's why she was willing to humble herself now, smiling obsequiously at the small-time bosses she once looked down upon. But it seemed the people she once looked down on now looked down on her. One of the bosses, who was getting annoyed with her persistence, saw me, and his eyes lit up instantly. He greeted me and walked over quickly. Seeing this, Sarah was stuck, unable to advance or retreat, just standing there awkwardly. But in the moment our eyes met, she flinched, all her former confidence gone. When the company was just starting out, Sarah disdained the schmoozing and networking that happened over drinks. I was always the one who handled that side of the business. Now both the company and our partners were well established. Naturally, they recognized me, not her. It was only logical. I didn't know what Sarah was so sentimental about. But the next second, as if she had made up her mind, she started walking toward me. I turned and said a few quiet words to my side. My bodyguard intercepted her. She couldn't get within 10 feet of me and was politely escorted out of the venue. Later that night, after the banquet ended, I ran into Sarah, who had been waiting for me by my car. I looked at her standing there. I ran through our past in my mind one more time, confirmed that everything that had happened was settled, and that there were no loose ends, and then, without a second thought, turned to get in my car. Sarah quickly reached out to stop me. The car door slammed on her hand, and I heard the sickening crack of breaking bones. Sarah's face went pale. She clutched her injured hand, but her eyes were still fixed on me. "Do we really have to end up like this, Mark?" Her voice was hoarse with pain. I rolled down the window, tossed out a check for $100,000, and gave her a slight smile. "For your medical bills." Then, without waiting to see if she would take it, I let go and stepped on the gas. Ever since seeing Sarah, I had been on my guard. This group was imploding, which meant they were starting to target me again. Sure enough, a couple of days later, I saw Leo, whom I hadn't seen in a long time, at the company entrance. If I remembered correctly, he was supposed to be at the City Theater for a very important competition right now. The organizing committee had sent me an invitation, and Leo's name was on the list of contestants. But here he was, not even in his performance attire, his face deliberately made up to look haggard. He was clearly here for me. Upon seeing me, Leo put on his most pitiful expression, and without a word, dropped to his knees. "Mark, I'm begging you, please let Sarah go. She's your sister-in-law now. How could you get revenge on her just because of your own feelings?" He wailed and sobbed, more dramatic than an opera singer. I looked up, and sure enough, I spotted several professional camera lenses in the growing crowd of onlookers. So that was his plan. I pulled his hand off me and said in a cold voice, "Leo, let's get something straight. You stole your brother's fiancée first. Then you couldn't control her and let her stalk and harass me. I acted in self-defense and paid her medical bills. What more do you want?" My voice was just loud enough for the onlookers to hear clearly. Leo's face went white, and his eyes filled with hatred. The whispers from the crowd grew louder. I knew he had another trick up his sleeve. And just as I expected, after another round of loud crying from Leo, two familiar figures appeared before me. If I could still feel emotions, I would probably be laughing out loud right now. I had to admit, their bond was truly strong. After the last disastrous confrontation, they had somehow managed to make up with Leo. Unfortunately, I no longer had feelings. So, before my parents could speak, their eyes darting around nervously, I held up a hand to stop them. I then motioned for my assistant to start recording with several cameras, pointed directly at them. I spoke calmly and slowly. "From this moment on, every word you say will be recorded as evidence and will be subject to legal consequences. If even half a sentence constitutes slander, I will file a lawsuit and pursue it to the fullest extent." Hearing this, my dad's face turned ashen. My mom's lips trembled. She tried to speak several times but couldn't get the words out. I had no patience to wait for her to compose herself. I turned to leave, which finally spurred her into action. She rushed forward, grabbed my leg, and burst into tears. "My son, what's happened to you? It's me, Mom. You never used to treat me like this," she cried. She sobbed about how hard it had been to raise me all these years. She said the pressure of adopting her husband's army buddy's son was immense, that their lives had been very difficult. She said I used to be such an understanding son, always considerate of their feelings. How could one missed surgery change me so much? "Mark, Mom is so sorry. The days you wouldn't talk to me, I was miserable every single day." The face that had always looked down on me with superiority was now wrinkled and frail. She looked up at me, her tears seeming more genuine this time. When I remained unmoved, she tightened her grip on my leg. "Are you really going to treat your mother like this? Don't you want me anymore?" I looked down into her tear-filled eyes, my heart completely still. As I was calculating how to respond without causing too much damage to the company's image, a pair of strong hands suddenly pulled her off my leg. I looked up to see my Aunt Clara, her eyes red with fury. "Get out!" she yelled, pointing at my parents and Leo like a lioness protecting her cub. "I have proof of everything you've done," she said. "Don't force me to make it all public." She continued, "Mark has suffered so much to get where he is today. Now that his life is finally getting better, you show up to torment him again? Are you even his parents? That's enough. This is our family business. It's not your place to interfere," my dad shouted from a short distance away. At this, my aunt gave a grim smile and, pointing at the silent Leo, addressed the crowd. "Everyone, this is my brother's adopted son, the man for whom my brother abandoned his own flesh and blood." Leo flinched as he was called out. He seemed to realize what was happening and lunged at my aunt, trying to stop her from speaking. But it was too late. My aunt turned back to my mother, who was still on the ground, and shouted, "My brother doesn't have a deceased army buddy. The boy he adopted is the son he had, with his first love after he was already married." The words hit like a bolt of lightning, jolting my mother, who had been staring blankly back to her feet. She looked at my dad with a mixture of shock and fury, but she was still uncertain. It wasn't until Leo, unable to take the pressure, turned and tried to disappear into the crowd that my mom was snapped back to reality. She rushed over, grabbed him, and studied his face carefully for a moment. Then, she slapped him hard across the face. Leo cried out in pain. It was a heavy blow. Since coming to our family at the age of 6, Leo had been treated like a precious jewel by my parents. He had never been treated like this before. His usually innocent eyes filled with tears. But his tears only seemed to provoke my mother further. "You bastard! You bastard! I treated you like my own son, and this is how you repay me!" My mother grabbed anything she could find and used it as a weapon, striking Leo again and again. He dodged clumsily while looking to my dad for help. The crowd was just watching the show. No one had expected that the family who came to confront me would end up imploding on themselves. The paparazzi Leo had hired had long since been escorted away by my private security. As my aunt was leading me away, the scene had escalated to my dad taking a slap for Leo, then pinning my mom to the ground and hitting her. Seeing things get out of control, security guards rushed in to clear the area again. Their family ended up at the police station once more. Only this time, I brought the paparazzi he had hired and the pre-written news articles they were going to use to slander me. Inciting a disturbance and spreading rumors, Leo couldn't escape the charges. In the end, it was Sarah, one hand still bandaged, who rushed over from her home to bail them out. The massive scene at my company's entrance had long since become a trending topic locally. Sarah probably knew what had happened on her way over, but when she saw the disheveled Leo at the police station, her face was still full of disbelief. "Leo, weren't you supposed to be at the competition?" she asked, her eyes fixed on him. When she noticed that the clothes under his jacket weren't his performance outfit either, she fell silent. Sarah had fallen in love with his persona as an artist obsessed with his craft. She supported Leo's painting as if she were making up for her own past, for the rule-following girl who never dared to chase her dreams. She had even swallowed her pride for him, humbling herself to deal with the daily grind of life. But now, that persona was on the verge of collapse. To come and slander his adoptive brother, Leo had easily given up the competition he claimed was more important than his own life. People are like that. Sometimes, in the heat of the moment, they can be reckless, but falling out of love can happen in an instant. Seeing the doubt in Sarah's eyes, Leo was clearly panicked. Tears rolled down his cheeks as he quickly explained, "Sarah, it's not like that. It was Mark. He had people sabotage me at the competition. I had no choice but to do this. I was just trying to get him to leave me alone." This was Leo's original plan. Show up at my company, team up with my parents to smear my name, and paint me as a jealous, evil brother who framed him. Then he would use the opportunity to claim I had rigged the competition so he couldn't win. He would miss this one competition, but the publicity would make him famous. It was a win-win for him. It was a risky move, but Leo was emboldened, knowing my family would back him up. He thought he could crucify me with public opinion, but he never expected my aunt to find out that he was the product of my dad's affair. One wrong move, and he lost the whole game. And even now, he was still trying to pin the blame on me. But before Sarah had even walked in, my assistant had already laid out the entire sequence of events for her. That included the transaction records between Leo and the paparazzi, and the slanderous stories they had prepared. Many of the events they described hadn't even happened yet, but they spoke of them with such conviction. The competition's organizing committee had also issued a statement. They had a decades-long reputation to uphold and were furious that Leo had not only skipped the competition, but was also planning to slander them. Some of the senior members were friends with Sarah's parents. No matter how much Sarah tried to cover for him, they already knew all about Leo. Sarah's plan to slowly build Leo's fame and then introduce him to her family was now in ruins. I don't know what state of mind she was in when she came to see Leo, but the fact that he lied to her face the moment he saw her sealed his fate with her. The illusion was shattered. Sarah's gaze turned cold. She didn't say another word, just turned and walked away. Leo was left stunned, watching his last hope disappear. Without Sarah to pay his fines, Leo was served with a 15-day detention. During that time, the art competition committee sued Leo. With Sarah's parents pulling strings, the 15 days were extended to 2 months. My parents were locked up with him. After living a life of prestige, they were now being sent to jail twice in 1 year in their old age. The scandal of the affair was also exposed. All the praise my mother had received for adopting Leo now turned into an equal amount of ridicule and scorn. Before she was taken away, she asked me one last time if I really wanted things to end like this. I turned around and told her very seriously, word for word, that I wasn't making a scene. I had just been swept along by life for so many years, and now I wanted to break free from the undertow. I just wanted to live my own life, no longer held hostage by family ties, no longer holding out hope for people who didn't deserve it, no longer sacrificing myself just to get a crumb of their attention. Do you understand? I stopped loving you a long time ago. This is the last time I will call you this. Let's just go our separate ways from now on, Mom and Dad. As the last words fell, I couldn't read my dad's expression. I turned to leave. In my peripheral vision, I saw that my mom was already in tears. Seeing me go, she opened her mouth frantically, but ultimately said nothing. By now, she probably did regret it. She had given her whole life to this, only to push her own son away and end up raising someone else's child. But what did any of that have to do with me? In my first 20-something years, I had shed more than enough tears for them. When I walked out of the police station, my aunt was waiting for me. She was one of the few people in the world who truly understood my father. She was worried that now that I had publicly humiliated him, he would do something to hurt me. And Leo, my aunt said, the worry in her eyes deepening. He's not the type to stay quiet. I gently placed my hand over hers and told her that we weren't as weak as we used to be. We would handle whatever came our way. Hearing this, my aunt finally relaxed a little. After that, I had someone keep an eye on Leo's family. I knew that Sarah and Leo had broken up. Leo refused to accept it, even causing scenes at her parents' house several times, which resulted in him getting beaten up badly. After all the years and all the money my parents had invested, Leo was blacklisted from the national art scene overnight. He simply vanished. Having lost his support system, Leo crawled back to my dad, clinging to my parents. But the sight of Leo now only filled my mother with resentment. She wanted to divorce my dad, but he refused. So she took out her anger on Leo, hitting and cursing him daily. During this time, my business continued to grow, showing potential for expansion into overseas markets. Sarah's parents, who once looked down on me, now sent me invitations. Sarah herself tried to contact me numerous times, but I never once responded. Later, at a banquet, Sarah and I met again. She seemed much more mature than before, but her gaze was filled with melancholy when she looked at me. "Mark, you've become so successful. I almost don't recognize you anymore," she said, her eyes not knowing where to look. A person who had been confident for most of her life couldn't even stand up straight in front of me now. She hadn't changed much, but she had lost her former pride. As if afraid I would have her thrown out, Sarah started talking quickly. She said she had always owed me a face-to-face apology. She said that after all this time, she finally realized she had never truly loved Leo. She had just projected her own desires onto him, thinking she could find her true self through him. It's only now that I realize how naive I was. It was only after I lost you that I understood what I had truly thrown away. I had little patience for her speech. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore, and stood up to leave. "Mark!" Sarah called my name loudly from behind me. "Can we start over?" "No, I'm not interested in trash," I said with a smile, rejecting her without a hint of politeness. "Sarah, no matter how nicely you put it, it doesn't change the fact that you cheated on me because you couldn't resist a new thrill. The fact that you have the nerve to show your face in front of me is truly shameless. Once the filter I had for Sarah was gone, I realized that the person I had once worshipped was nothing special. Besides, I had long since surpassed the position she once held. From now on, I would be the one to light up my own life. Perhaps the shock of my rejection was too much. Not long after, I heard that Sarah and Leo had gotten back together. It's true what they say. Once a cheater, always a cheater. Only this time, Leo no longer enjoyed the pampered treatment he once had. Sarah showed him her cruel side without mercy. She frequently beat him. Not only that, but she also verbally degraded him, calling him the most despicable man on earth. She looked down on him, yet she sought to find her dignity and satisfaction through him. While they were entangled in their toxic relationship, my parents surprisingly reconciled. I heard my mom was pregnant again. Having a child late in life made her completely abandon the idea of divorce, and she even accepted Leo back into her life. On a stormy, rain-lashed night, an urgent call from an unknown number came to my phone. When I answered, it was my dad's panicked voice. "Mark, your mother fell at home. She's bleeding a lot. We don't know what to do. I'm begging you, please come see her. She raised you for over 20 years. After hanging up, I calmly dialed 911 and called an ambulance for them. My aunt looked at me worriedly from the side, getting up several times to ask if I wanted her to go with me. "There's no need. I'm not a doctor. I wouldn't be any help," I said calmly. My aunt looked at me for a long time before finally agreeing in a low voice. You're right. The weather's bad. It would be dangerous to go out." Hearing her words, a flicker of confusion crossed my mind. Later that night, after finishing up some work, I was getting ready for bed when my phone vibrated. I answered it to a burst of static. I hung up without a second thought. It was only after I closed the call screen that I saw the same number had sent me several text messages. The latest one was brief. "I'm sorry. A person like me doesn't deserve to be your mother. You and your aunt live well. Mark, Mom is going to atone for her sins." Scrolling up, there were only 3 words. "Don't come." My heart suddenly skipped a beat. A long-forgotten sense of alarm filled my chest. I pushed back my chair, stood up, and started for the door. But when my eyes fell on the violent storm raging outside, my steps slowed. Finally, I took out my phone and dialed the police precinct for my parents' district. The first call I received the next morning was from the police. They told me that there had been a fire at my parents' old apartment complex the previous night. Leo, my parents, and Sarah were all found dead in the apartment. After an investigation, they suspected arson. The medical examiner had found excessive amounts of sleeping pills in all 4 of the victims' bodies. For a moment, I didn't know what to feel. The emotional stir from last night's text message was gone in a flash, and my mind returned to a state of complete calm. My aunt, however, had red eyes when she looked at me. She hugged me tightly and comforted me softly, telling me that I still had her as my family. I lowered my gaze and said nothing. A long time later, when the police investigation concluded, I finally learned what had really happened that night. It turned out my mother wasn't pregnant at all. She wanted to divorce my dad, but he felt it would be a humiliation and tied her up at home. Leo was not doing well at that time. Thanks to Sarah's parents, his reputation was ruined at his university, and he was blacklisted in the art world. He was a shut-in, taking out his frustrations on my mother. Of course, the person he hated most was me. He blamed me for his current situation. Plus, Sarah was constantly playing games with him, often using me to belittle him. So Leo and my dad came up with a vicious plan. They wanted to use my mom to lure me over, then stage an accident to kill me and divide up my assets. My mother found out about the plan, and she offered to help them. In my dad's eyes, my mother hated me as much as he did, so he didn't suspect her. So, on that rainy night, my mother added sleeping pills to my dad's and Leo's food. She also called Sarah over. Although Sarah looked down on Leo, she still respected my mother. When she arrived, she was drugged as well. My mother laid the 3 of them out neatly together, then turned on the gas stove. In addition, we obtained Ms. Hayes' suicide note from one of your relatives, the officer said. He handed me a letter. I opened it. The paper was stained with tears. "Mark, if we are fated to meet in the next life, I promise I will be a good mother. In this life, I will go and atone for my sins." I thought, if there really is a next life, it would be better if we didn't get entangled again. After that, my aunt and I lived a good life. In the winter, I would make dumplings at her house, which she had decorated in warm, cozy colors. The first snowflake fell just as she called me over to eat. When I turned my head, I saw my aunt's kind profile, and a familiar warmth began to thaw the ice around my heart. And so, I gave my aunt the first genuinely grateful smile I had shown in a very long time. Seeing this, my aunt froze in place, holding the plate. Gradually, her eyes reddened as well. We looked at each other and smiled. Finally, after weathering 1,000 storms, the road ahead was clear, filled with the warmth of spring.